Hello and welcome. It's exciting, isn't it? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this conversation, we're going to be looking at value in talent and particularly recognising and retaining our biggest asset, which is our teams. Let's go back to the results and the data that was shown earlier this morning. So just to recap, 1 in 5 of respondents had said that they're likely to leave the industry in the next 12 months. And that was cited, well, a majority were wanting to leave due to pay and other opportunities elsewhere. Furthermore, when we looked at the data further, we saw that 71% were aged between 16 and 34. So not only are we looking at losing a lot of talent, but it's between the ages of where we're generally talking about attracting the talent, so 16 plus up to 34. What I'd really like us to do is to think about honestly, open and honestly, what this data is saying to us, but also kind of look at tangible, positive actions that everyone here can kind of take away and install within their organisations tomorrow. So with that in mind, I'd love to open the session, starting with you, Neil, in terms of what's your reaction to the findings? So the 1 in 5 likely to leave in the next 12 months due to not being paid enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that much.
Yeah.
I'm CEO at St Luke's, and we have historically had a really, really low churn rate, like 8–12%. At most, people just don't leave. You know, they come, they love it. There's a very strong sense of belonging there, and as a result, people look at their package at St Luke's, and the salary is just one bit.
Yeah.
You know, what the values of the place, the bonds they have with people there, the kind of work they do, and the way we do work just means that people don't want to move on. But that has definitely changed in the last year. We've seen that really dramatically, and we've seen our people being offered 20%, 25%, even 50% more money to go and work somewhere else. And when bills are astronomical, cost of living is a real problem, then suddenly people are going for the money, and the pull of the culture is much more difficult to keep them for that sake. So we're definitely seeing financial hardship.
Yeah.
People are unable to pay their bills, and so those kind of, if people can pay, and there's a talent shortage, so that's what's happening.
So you didn't feel surprised to see that. SJ, what were your thoughts to?
Yeah, as Neil said, similarly, not surprised. We're experiencing our own churn, as I'm sure most people in the room are experiencing. And there are clearly macro issues. People spent a lot of time at home in lockdown and sort of reconfigured what was important in their lives. We've got a cost of living crisis. London was already one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. So all those things, and in truth, we're not great at looking after talent. Like there is a reality check about how we are. You've got to control what you can control, and we've got to get better at looking after our talent.
Thank you for that. Before I ask your response to that, Jake, what I want to kind of us to consider is there's been a recent cost of living analysis undertaken by think tank Kudos, and what they found was that junior level executives that are living in a flat share, living in London, after paying their essential bills, are left with just £27 per month. So when we think about that stat and what we're seeing in terms of the response from the data today, what's your response to that?
That's clearly unsustainable. People can't live in London and be on some of the salaries at entry level that some of parts of the industry offer. It just doesn't work. The equation doesn't work. So I think there's a couple of things to say on that. I mean, you know, obviously, like anyone, we have our churn as well, but we're currently running at about 7%, which is, you know, testament to, you know, what we're doing, and, you know, being a campaign best place to work in 2 years in a row. So, you know, one of the things that I think is really important is that agencies, people in this sector need to pay the living wage, you know, as just a basis, as a bare minimum, because, you know, if you are in a flat share and have 27 quid left, well, then you're going to find it very difficult to work in this industry. And, you know, that massively impacts on the sort of diversity of talent that we can attract to the industry, because, you know, then we can only attract people that have the bank of mum and dad, or you know, people that go to fee-paying schools or have been through wealth, for example, that can afford to come into the industry. And I think that's a massive, you know, problem. And I think most organisations can afford to pay the living wage. You know, I think most people could drop their profits a bit and put that into a fair and equitable wage. Mm-hmm. I also think that there's a second issue on flexible working, and Sarah, you touched on it, about people, you know, within the pandemic, obviously working a lot from home. You know, back when I was, you know, first setting out running Media Bounty, you know, we do things very differently now to when we did then. And I remember, you know, somebody coming in, often they were 5 minutes late, and they ran a team, and I'd take them into the room and go, why are you 5 minutes late and stuff? I look back at that, and the person I was then going, what were you doing? Like,
even your mic didn't like that old person.
I know, rightly so. And it's like, it's idiotic. I think we've been very much, you know, we've talked to our team and we've sort of said, what would you like to do in terms of your working patterns? And, you know, literally it came back almost as quarter, you know, come in quite a lot, 3 to 4 days a week, one to 2 days a week, 1 to 2 days a month, not at all. Mm-hmm. And we went, do what you like then. And so that point about trust and trusting people to manage their own affairs, do the best work that they can, but also, you know, if I'm back in the day talking to somebody about being 5 minutes late, well, you know, I don't know what childcare issues they might have had, what parental issues they might have had, what issues they might be, you know, currently having with their own mental health, for example. So I think that sort of, those two things together, paying the living wage, but also being a flexible and trusting and a respectful employer, those two things work together. Because also you can't have, you almost can't have one or the other. You can't do both. You can't say, come and work in London, but we're not going to pay you the living wage. Yeah. So that doesn't compute.
When we had our pre-session call, we were talking about the article that you had shared at the end of last year, talking about what the industry can do about pay. And I shared that when I started the industry 20 years ago, I was 2 when I started, my starting salary, and I'm a single mum of twins, was 15.5k. 15.5k, yeah? So I must be an anomaly to have made that work, but when we're looking at that, what do we see much change 20 years on from that starting salary, do you think?
I think we should. I mean, I was on 17, and you know, and that isn't currently the living wage.
I mean, you're a man, so you've got paid more.
yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. My privilege allowed me that extra. But I think that it is clear that in a cost of living crisis, paying people that level is unsustainable. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's also important about attracting work experience, like people were talking about work experience earlier, is paying people to come as work experience as well and pay them the living wage as well. You know, Matt from Google was talking about people not being able to potentially afford to, you know, what they might wear to come into an interview or a train ticket as well. Well, if people can't afford that, they're not going to be able to afford to live in, you know, London and travel around and so on. So I just think that's just a reckoning that the industry's got to go through.
Neil, I want to kind of bring you in to talk about St Luke's and over the last 27 years, how you've really instilled, sorry.
Yeah, my starting salary was 8.5.
How you've installed that retention, because you both shared your retention figures and they're way below the industry, which is fantastic. But what sort of solutions did you bring in place to create that sense of value in talent so that they know that they're valued at St Luke's?
Wow, well, I guess the thing that makes St Luke's really distinctive, I think, when I joined it, I felt it immediately, and when clients come in, is that immense sense of belonging. Mm-hmm. You know, people have real bonds, there's a real sense of trust, there's a real sense of being listened to and respected and looked after. And when I talk to people in interviews, and that is what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. You know, I say, what are you looking for? And of course, they want support, they want to be developed, they want to be looked after, and they're not getting that where they are at the moment. And so even though we won't necessarily be offering the same money as other people, and we know that people get counter-offered more money, they come to us because that's what they want. So a few things we do. So one of the really kind of potent things we do, we have a set of pillars we look at people through. So we say, it's know me, value me, protect me, inspire me. And we look at a person, and by thinking about those 4 things, we can build a really individual picture of them and build a pathway for them and a set of opportunities for them that's absolutely right for them. One of the things we did really early on was create a very different kind of training scheme, which we call the Make Yourself More Interesting Fund, where everyone gets £200 a year to go and learn whatever they like. So they can learn to be a yoga teacher, a nail technician, Indian cookery, whatever. That's just a few things that people have done recently. And what that does is it connects you to the real person, rather than just be a great ad manager, be a great producer. Of course, we'll give lots of training on that, but it's really understanding them as complete people. And by doing that, you get very different insight coming into the agency. You know, you're not just, if you've got a well-being client, you're not just talking about not doing some focus groups or some store visits, you're talking to someone who's just done a yoga course. So that really changes things. But it changes the relationship between the person and the business, because those people really believe that we believe in them and we want to see something different from them. So it's those kind of initiatives that create a very different sense of belonging in the agency.
SJ, I'd like to move over to you and just ask, at Saatchi & Saatchi, what sort of things are you doing to attract and retain talent when we're facing COSIlism, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation around belonging has to be central to this. It's such an incredibly sticky and potent sort of dynamic to bring in, and there's no excuse whether you're a big agency like Saatchi, or I've always been a slightly smaller but amazing scrappy agency like the St. Luke's. Like, belonging matters, and that has to be hardwired. I think there are definitely things we're doing. I do want to talk about the fact that we need more money in our industry. That, like, yeah, we can do all these brilliant and really important initiatives, but I think, certainly to any agency people in the room, we've got to make sure clients value what we do. We need to not give away what we do brilliantly. We need to understand the value exchange and just make sure that we aren't, as an industry, like racing to the bottom line. New business and pitching, we've all seen us do it. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to be respectful of the value we bring and make sure that we're getting paid properly, and then more money comes in. Like, that's the biggest fix here. More money in, we can pay people properly. But that may take some time to adjust. So I think, yeah, like we get forensic on we look at salaries in detail. Every time there's a pay window, we look at every single person in the agency. And I don't know if our head of HR, our talent leader's here, but KP is amazing. Like, she will know every single person's salary because she's been so forensic. She sits down with discipline leads and she works through it. So we're really respectful of salaries. We talk about it openly. We can all be very British, can't we? Like, let's talk about the money, and then no one might ask. And then, but no, like, so be forensic around salaries. Be open with individuals. Progression's important. The fastest way to earn more money in our industry is to get promoted. I want to promote an account manager to AD. I don't want to bring in a new AD. Like, what are we doing to really think about progression, so people don't go, oh, I'm going to start accidentally having a conversation over there, and oh, there's a bit more money. So progression. And this, finally, because there is no magic money tree, just like we are so awesome with our clients' briefs and we apply creativity every day, we've got to apply that same smarts and energy and chutzpah to some of these challenges around D&I and how we look after our talent. So at Saatchi, for example, we've got Saatchi Home, which is an awesome initiative, which I would love everyone in this room to steal and hack and relabel. We work with a brilliant organisation called London Hostel Association. They have brilliant accommodation, student-style accommodation, very private, incredibly secure, en-suite bathrooms, and then communal kitchens and stuff. And that's already a subsidised charity. By definition, that is a more affordable accommodation. We then further subsidise it. So it allows for our entry level and below a certain salary threshold. That makes London achievable, just about, with the London living wage. Gives them a built-in community. It means they might stay there for a month, and they might stay there for 6 months, but they don't have to go, like, oh, where is Tooting? I don't know where to live. Is Morden too far out? So we've applied creativity to build Saatchi Home, and we've properly built it, and we've packaged it. So that, I think, is us applying our brilliant smarts and creativity to a really gnarly systemic problem.
I love that. And how many people can benefit from that at one stage and when they join?
It's scalable because they've got, I think, about 11 or 12 big buildings. I think like big campus-type buildings you get on, like halls of residences. And at any one time, we might have like 4 or 5 people staying there. Most people stay there for 6 to 12 months. Someone stayed there for 18 months because they sort of just needed a bit of extra help. But as ever, applying some common sense, and then you go, well, if you need to stay there a bit longer, then definitely stay there a bit longer. But London, like we talk about it being expensive, but it's a strange city, it's a lonely city. So again, just thinking about how we can build communities for our entry level, again, just take some of the pressures off. Because if you've got £27 left at the end of the month, or £27 after you've paid your rent, at least having a crew around you is going to make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. Jake, what are your thoughts? How can what other solutions can we look to in this time that anyone in this room can kind of take away?
I think I'd echo certainly the kind of point about, you know, getting the industry to value the work that this industry does. I totally agree with that. Echoing some of the conversations earlier as well is, you know, I think we're a place that has a lot of psychological security, and that's not just, you know, that's at every level as well. You know, I feel like I can talk to the team about my personal issues as well as like being the lonely person listening to everybody else as well, if you see what I mean. So that sort of psychological security and people feeling like they can bring their whole self to work is a really important, you know, that sense of belonging, I think, is a really important point. I think one of the things that we've done from a very early stage is, you know, we're a B Corp now. I think we're one of the only sort of integrated B Corps that there are, but right from word go, we put 5 days of volunteering on top of everybody's holiday into everybody's contract, which means that people then go out into communities and they go to, you know, things that they're passionate about and volunteer. And that sometimes can be different things that they do year on year, but sometimes people build very long relationships then with the particular charity that they're volunteering on, and, you know, people in our team have become trustees of those charities, for example. You know, my business partner is a trustee of the World Land Trust. I co-chair and co-run the Conscious Advertising Network with Harriet as well. So there's that kind of space to do stuff, you know, outside of the business as well, and permission and support to do that, which is contractual support rather than, well, you can do this, but you probably should. You know, it's that hardwiring it into support. And I also think that the kind of, you know, we're a business that sort of stands on our values. You kind of have to with a B Corp. And the other thing that I think is really important is, you know, closing that say-do gap. And we, you know, proudly say we're an ethical business. And then when people join, we don't go, oh yeah, we're an ethical business and you're on the Chevron account. So I think there's a real kind of, you know, I think, you know, talent now, everybody in this room recognizes, obviously we're in a cost of living crisis, we're also in a climate crisis that ain't going away anytime soon. You know, we're not going to be sat here at the All-In Summit in a couple of years' time and going, glad we solved that climate crisis from a couple of years ago. That was a terrible time, wasn't it? So I think that, you know, we also have to recognize our talent is not going to be keen on working on business that doesn't align with their values. And we're actually getting approached by quite a lot of people that we can't afford to say, well, do you have opportunities and openings? Because people are not comfortable working on the sort of work that is driving us towards, you know, breakdown, catastrophe, you know, society breakdown, you know, that people are not happy contributing to that route. So I think that's a really important thing about, you know, that values alignment between an organization and the teams that work with you.
With that, talking about values and making sure that they align and that you're actually, as an organization, doing what you say, how have all three of you ensured that that remains front and centre of what you're doing day to day with that talent?
I think what we've done is form a conversation with our people that is ongoing and really open. So what we want, and we've wanted from the beginning, is for people to be living their personal values through work. So it's not like, oh, there's the office and they do that, and there's me at home doing something completely different. We were a cooperative to start with, and we learnt a hell of a lot from that because everyone was an owner. So everyone behaved like an owner and said exactly what they wanted. So we went to sustainability back in 1995 with the first agency to be carbon neutral because the people were the owners and they wanted to do that. And so although we're not owned like that now, that sense of an open conversation we maintain all the time. So we have a rhythm through the year of status meetings, update meetings, regular quarterly creative review meetings, annual away days. But these meetings are all very collaborative meetings. It's not the management doing a top-down update. It's very much a hosted conversation with everyone putting in their views. And that way, everyone feels heard. Everyone feels like they can express what they want. And those are the ideas that will go through and be part of the story of the agency. And that, again, is a sense of belonging, a sense of this is me in my workplace. And that's very different from, I think, traditionally how it used to be.
I like that, and that's just made me think about something that I saw yesterday, which was talking about KPIs, key performance indicators. And I said, well, let's switch that. Let's change that to keep people involved, keep people interested, keep people inspired. Exactly. How do you feel about that approach?
Yeah, I love that, and I also love the conversation it's really important that we talked about money, but it's important that we pivot, because I think money is the tip of a bad iceberg. There's a lot that sits underneath that disillusionment, and it comes through when people talk, I think, about, well, money's the reason, and we do have to be more purpose-led. And there's an excellent statistic from YouGov, which we can all take back to our finance directors. And it says that Gen Z in particular they're so committed to purpose-led and creating change that they will take a reduction in salary of 20%. So do the maths and flip that round. So I think purpose is critical to offset some of the challenges we've got about balancing money. So it's great that we're having this conversation. I think, well, for Saatchi & Saatchi, one of the things we've really doubled down on in the last few years in particular is around DE&I and just creating a space where amazing talent can thrive regardless of their background. And purpose takes sacrifice. And it means that you do have to have those awkward conversations about, I know you want to hire X, but look at the data. We're not good enough in this space. So it just means you've got to make some really, like, talent as our USP. Talent's the difference between one agency and another. And you're having to say to someone, I don't even want you to hire that person, because you've got to adjust the composition of your discipline. So there is sacrifice that we need to make as leaders to make sure we are staying committed to something we have publicly said. So I think of definitely some practical advice is say out loud what you're going to do, because then you can't go back on it. The more you can say it out loud, the more you can squeeze it into
once it's out there, it's out there.
Get into a headline, tell people in their interviews, say it publicly, say it to your crew, say it to your agencies, say it to your organisations. This is what I'm setting out to do, because they will lordy hold you accountable, and that's a good thing. So I think that's another thing we need to do, because it's so easy to sometimes take that easy option or not choose to make the sacrifice because of all the stresses that we're all under. So make it public, because people will hold us true to that.
I've just been thinking about the conversations that we've had leading up to this panel, and also one of the stats that we saw around women feeling disproportionately affected when they have children or they take a step away from the workplace. I'd love you to kind of share what your approach has been at St Luke's on this, because I think that really speaks to the 25 to 34 demographic that are looking to leave the industry.
Yeah, it's so tough. People talk about, should we do cost of living payments and so on, but when money's short, clients haven't got budgets, we don't have the money to do that kind of thing. So we have to take very targeted decisions. And one of the groups that we felt were really under pressure were people paying childcare. So new parents suddenly got, they're cutting back on the amount of work they can do, the amount of time one or two of them can do. And then they've got the horrific cost of childcare. So we decided to support new parents. We give up to £500 a month support. It's tapered, so but even if you're on 70 grand, you're still getting some of that money for the first 3 years of the child's life. And that was done. Obviously, people are incredibly grateful for it, but it's really important, because it's not all the money, but it does help level the playing field, and it just tips the balance when you've got, of course, it's women particularly taking the burden generally, and they're having to make a decision: can I afford to go back and continue my career or not? And so those payments have really helped make that a non-debate. And so ultimately, it's about trying to close or helping to close the gender pay gap and not have women forced out of the industry because of the horrific cost of childcare. So those kind of initiatives, we hear the need for this from the open conversation that we have all the time, and so we're able to respond and move quickly.
I'm going to ask you about that response, because there may be people thinking, oh, well, how long did that take to go? How long did that change take to happen? So what was the process, and what sort of time frame are we talking? Because we want people to leave here and be able to do that sort of thing tomorrow.
It happened in 2 weeks.
Or in 2 weeks' time.
So we had someone, she was going on maternity. Now she's paid more than 70 grand, but she saw the opportunity to provide assistance in that area. She came to me. I thought it was a brilliant idea. We looked at how we could implement it. We did that very quickly. There's a childcare voucher scheme that means it's tax efficient, and there's rules and parameters that are really helpful around it. And we decided it within, had a management meeting, and that was it. Decided, launched. The exact implementation took a couple more weeks to get right, but very, very quickly we were. But you know, we're a small agency, independent agency, so we can take those kind of decisions very quickly.
Can I add to it then, from an agency that sits within a holding company model? There are certainly Publicis Group have got a very good maternity and parental package. I think WPP have also got a good one. The thing to bear in mind if you're in a holding company, know how competitive the holding companies are with each other. So if one of them's doing it great, you tell your holding company and you make it loud and go, why can they afford to do that and we can't? So there's my top tip. Learn what the holding companies are doing and play them off against each other, and then everyone rises. I can see Karen Black here. Corner of my eye.
Jake, what are your thoughts? How quickly have you been able to create? So you have a lot of conversation with your teams. How quickly do you respond and create that change when they are like, we're not going to work with Shell?
Yeah, pretty quickly. On sort of that issue, we have an ethics committee that comes from across the different parts of the business that feed into all of our decisions. They look at our DE&I surveys that we do. They look at our staff engagement surveys that we do with our people, and kind of everything's then fed sideways, upwards, downwards, and so on. So there's sort of transparency through the business. I think on the issue of kind of making sure that the values align with the sorts of clients that you want to work with, we involve the team in that too. So it's not just a kind of, top-down decision. If we're unsure, and sometimes there are briefs that come to us where we're like, ooh. So there was a fast fashion brief that came to us that we didn't really know whether it was or not fast fashion. Back then when it first came, the sort of the team highlighted, are you sure about this? Because you're circulating this brief. We weren't going for it, but it was sort of sharing it with the team. And so we got questioned. And like you were saying, Sarah, it's like people will hold you accountable if you say things out loud that you're going to do. And that should be massively welcome. So we then went on a process of researching the organisation, talking to the team, talking to people in the industry, what's the publicly available data, and then going to the organisation and going, do you have a plan? That, because we're happily go with people on a journey if they have a proper, plan that is going to be implemented. We want to help those sorts of organisations. And they kind of went, not really. And we went, well, we're not going to work with you then. So it's kind of that ongoing engagement with, the team, but also other people in the industry and the potential client if it's a new business piece. I think that's really important, rather than either going a flat no or a yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then all your team look at you and go, but I thought you said we're a B Corp ethical agency. That doesn't, so I think it's really important to make sure that the team's involved throughout.
I want to open up the floor to questions, but before I do, I'd love each of you to share at least one action or consideration that you'd like to leave the audience with when it talks about valuing, showing that they're valuing talent and recognising the work that they do and why they're important to that organisation. So I'm going to start with you, Neil.
Well, as we were talking, I was thinking one of the most important things at the moment is to keep recruiting, because and recruiting from a very diverse range of people as well. So we've just started a thing called Flying Start, which is specifically targeted at underrepresented racial groups to make sure that we're getting a cohort joining the agency or knowing about the agency from that section, but keeping it open, keeping the creative placements going, keeping the internships going. We have a 3-month internship that we don't have a grad scheme. That is our way of getting people in, because this is talent shortage is causing the problem. It's called, with the talent shortage, it's very, very difficult. And so you've got to keep a lot of focus on maintaining young people coming into the industry.
Thank you. I think there's a massive, when things are hard now, it's like doubling down, like we don't have the spend for this. Or keep on repeating what we've done before. You can't keep doing that and expect a different result, because that would be silly. It's not going to work, right? So it's continuing forward.
Yeah, keep that focus. I mean, ultimately, it's paid back by keeping our internship scheme up and our creative placements. It's paid back so much in terms of the long-term committed people we have in the agency. So absolutely, it's a thing to keep investing in.
Over to you, SJ. What's the one thing?
Yeah, I've probably sort of already mentioned it. It might not be the root of the problem, but I do think it's fundamental how we get paid. And I think we all need to feel a lot more comfortable talking about value with our clients and really being happy to talk about the value we bring, because our industry is magical, creativity is magical, the leaps we make are extraordinary. So give McKinsey a bit less money, pull it back in to what we do and what our industry is delivering. That we should be really, really proud of the impact we have on our clients' business.
Brilliant. Jake?
I would definitely support that. I'd also say 3 very quick things, which again is a bit of repetition, but yeah, pay the London living wage if your business is in London. Support flexible working, genuinely flexible working, and not necessarily mandating when people should be in the office. That trust element in the team. If you hire well, then trust them to do great jobs. And together it ends up they come into the office because they want to spend time together anyway. So trust your team, and from both a short-term and a long-term point of view, I think that we need to divest out of big oil, because I think our talent are going to be running away from that if they're not already.
Perfect. I think there's rolling mic. So does anybody have a question? Anyone? Okay, 2. The mic's just there. It's just coming.
Hi there, I'm Jess. I work at WPP. I look after partnerships. With the changes in student loan repayments and cost of living increasing, are you looking at apprenticeships within your organisations, and have you launched any new programmes or created a strategy towards apprenticeships?
I can go on it. I think you've said 2 really important things there. One is student loans, which that's a factor that it's excruciating how much people are paying back in student loans. And if we're a generation that have just missed it, I don't think we actually are really aware of just how beaten up people are. It's horrific. So thank you for raising that. We've all got to be more cognizant. Apprenticeships are, and again, the levy's there. We've all got to get our heads around it. And being honest, I have tried and failed multiple times of making apprentices work. We've got to find a way through, and I would welcome anyone who can help me navigate that, because we work at a very fast pace. We have a pub in our agency. That's not necessarily conducive for young people from more diverse backgrounds. We've got to all get our head around what we can do to create an environment where apprentices can thrive, not just be sort of slotted in because there's a levy that we're trying to use up. So I have been trying and failing. Again, we've got an amazing talent leader, Saatchi & Saatchi and Publishers Group are really doubling down on it, but we've got to learn from each other, because I think there's a lot of mistakes we can make.
I just wanted to touch on that with the apprenticeship, because in the all-in data, it shows that only 8% of apprentices were looking at leaving in the next 12 months, whereas that raised to 23 and 27% for trainees or interns. So if you can get that right, then we're working in the right direction. Jake, did you want to add in on that?
We don't have an apprentice program. I mean, we're a small agency, so we don't have any experience of bringing in apprentices at this stage. We are looking at partnering with schools and bringing in interns into the organisation, but we don't have experience on that. So rather not comment on stuff I don't know about.
There was another question from the lady behind. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Bella, and I design courses through the LinkedIn Learn platform, amongst other things. I used to be agency side. I just wondered, Gen Zs and other groups, I'm a Gen Z to my mind in the way I think and look at the world. I'm 53. But, yeah, I think we're all Gen Zs now. And I'm an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm particularly focused on gender equality, Goal 5, Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, and Goal 10, reduced inequalities. And I just wondered, as we're in this age that we are now, what are your individual focus areas as some of the biggest issues of our time? What are you kind of focused on over the next, currently and over the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps?
Wow, that's a big
Yes,
question,
good
isn't
question.
it? So I'll sort of wear my media bounty hat and Conscious Advertising Network hat, because with the Conscious Advertising Network, which for those of you who don't know, we're trying to break the economic link between the harmful content that divides us and advertising. So we're doing quite a lot of work with various UN agencies, and it's really the intersection between advertising and human rights. So we're doing a lot of work on human rights and how advertising impacts on that, and the intersection of human rights and the climate crisis as well. So I think that the Sustainable Development Goals are great to bring everything together, but certainly, you know, in a time where human rights and civil rights are being chipped away at in so many different parts of the world, including right here, and I talked about the inevitability of the climate crisis, whether or not we realise it or not, we are all going to have to become, in our own way, activists to come together to work on what is already here, but what is coming.
And that is a perfect note to end on, because for some reason I can't tell the time. I thought we had more time than we did. So, fantastic. Thank you all for sharing and being really open about this. Hoping that everyone feels inspired to do at least one thing that you can change to look at valuing your talent. So, thanks very much. Thank you.